and have all money be on those chips and everything on those chips. And if anybody wants to protest what we do or violate what we want, we just turn off the chip.
Hitting with a baton a man while other officers hold that man down.
Change we can believe in. I didn't say change we can believe in tomorrow.
Есть серьезное основание полагать.
Аллаху Акбар! Аллаху Акбар! Аллаху Акбар!
We saw these individuals buy or begin turning up at crime scenes in the United States and in Mexico, and yet we still did nothing.
So why was he inaccurate? Why can't we keep our health care plans if we like them?
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. If you like your health care plan, you will be able to keep your health care plan, period.
Hi, welcome to the Fire Report. I'm your host, Duane Risko. Ladies and gentlemen, on the Fire Report tonight, I have a very special guest in studio with me. Tonight, some of the comments you're about to see are absolutely going to be shocking to some of you, and perhaps some of you out there are going to say, I knew it all along. You got to remember, whenever somebody throws out the word conspiracy theorists, they don't want you to listen what's going on because you just might get the truth. So without further ado, allow me to introduce one of my associate producers right here, the Fire Report, none other than Pastor Bob Papp. Pastor Papp, good to have you here.
Nice having me here.
Now, Bob, this show tonight, we're going to deal with something for many years I've doubted, but I really couldn't prove it. And when I tried to elaborate on it, people would laugh and mock, oh, you're one of those conspiracy theorists. Well, your dad just happened to work at NASA for many years.
Yes, he did. And he worked from 1949 to 1975. First, he was in Hawaii over at Hickam Field, and then they shipped him off over to Dayton. He was a certified welder, and then they shipped him off over to here in Brook Park, and he worked in the fabrication shop. And as always, you know, the conspiracy theorists all said, oh, well, this was a fake. Well, you know, it's been rumored that the Apollo 11 and the other moon landings were fake. Well, first, let me start off by showing you this plaque of my dad from 1949 to 1975. If you could scroll down on here, it says Robert R. Papp, N.A.S.A., certified welder from 1949 to 1975, and then he died August 11, 1999. He was 80 and he had a stroke. And he did say the sinner's prayer a week before he went home to be with the Lord. Now, and these are the actual space shuttle patches and other patches that the astronauts would wear. This is from the explosion from the Apollo, from the space shuttle, and this is the regular NASA logo.
Is that the one that the astronauts would wear?
Yes, on here. And this is from Apollo 15, and this is from Apollo 16, and this is one I never heard of, Astro 1. And then this here is from the Skylab, and this is a larger one of the space shuttle explosion. And like I said, I remember my dad saying that the Apollo 11 moon landing was a fake. And research that he done and that I'm doing now, it is was done in Area 51 out in Nevada. in a big warehouse. And there's a movie that's out. You might be able to find it on Netflix or maybe rent it from your library. It's called Capricorn 1. It starred O.J. Simpson and Richard Crenna. That exposes the Apollo 11 moon landings.
Well, let's ask a few questions about this.
Sure.
You turn around and say that for many years, all throughout schools, universities, history, A&E, documentaries about walking on the moon, walking on the moon. Back in the 60s, we were in a space age race with Russia to be the first on the moon.
Yeah.
Why did NASA have to fake this in order to beat Russia?
Well, my own personal opinion about that is because, as we know, the government lies to us and they like to cover things up. Well, the Bible teaches in Ephesians 5:11, expose the things that are done in darkness. And on this program, the Fire Report, you will get nothing but the truth and expose all the errors.
Now, here's what happens. In grade schools, when we start off in the grade schools, folks, they teach the children millions and millions and millions of years ago, billions and billions and billions of years ago, right off the bat, they're teaching evolution. By the time they get into junior high, it's millions and millions and millions of years ago, billions and billions and billions of years ago, it's evolution. You do the same thing with the space program, you do the same thing with global warming, you do the same thing with chemtrails. You get these children programmed, so by the time they get into the universities, everything we say is laughed, scoffed, and mocked. This fake landing on the moon, this had to be some serious stuff. In order for them to pull this off, Bob, NASA's considered one of the most honest programs around with the space age. This is how they're portrayed.
Right.
But you've got different inside information from your father.
Yeah, like I said, he worked at NASA in the fabrication shop, so he knew a lot of influential people. And so they were talking among the guys, and when he first saw the moon landing on TV, he said to us, me and my mom, that was fake. Because if you go on YouTube and type in some of those videos, like the video that you're going to be seeing after this program is called Science Proves That the Moon Landings Was a Fake. Now, people, let me ask you this question. Now, as Duane said, the people in the schools and all the colleges were programmed that we humans were evolved from apes. All right, now think about this one. If we were, so we exposed the doctrine, just like my dad, back in the 60s, I went to public school, and once he found out how, what they were teaching, he took me out and put me in a Catholic school. It's like what Common Core is today. He knew about all that back in the 60s.
When they cover these things up inside NASA, your dad worked inside with other guys, and they talked about this. The Apollo 11 was supposed to be the one that hit the home run to guarantee that we walked on the moon.
Right.
When they took all those pictures, and they played them over and over, and we've seen them on Channel 5, Channel 3, Channel 8, whatnot, nationwide. Here's this flag sticking straight out. When I first seen this, I said to myself, how could this be if this flag is sticking straight out when there's a different atmosphere up on the moon? How did they sell this to the public?
Well, I would say maybe they would, well, we know how the government is all corrupt. So what I'm thinking is, payoff, they fool the people. And from the looks of this picture, it had to have like an aluminum frame around it to support that. Because as my dad said, it would be it'll be a lot of radiation in space. And if you go to YouTube and type in those videos, you could actually see the scenery in the back is not right.
Yeah, when you look at the landscape, you can't see the picture very well from there, folks. But over here, the picture that you can see, and we've all seen on TV, here's a guy walking with a jetpack on, and here's a flag going straight out. That's 20, 30 mile an hour winds. Did we ever get any reports of 20, 30 mile an hour winds on the moon?
No.
So that flag was the first thing that I noticed that something just isn't right. Plus, excuse me, if you look farther on their pictures, it looks like you're ready to fall off. If you go so far, you're going to drop right off.
Right, yeah. And like you say, that movie, Capricorn 1, exposes all this. Just like, I'll touch on this real quick. Duane did a program on faith healers, those Pentecostal faith healers. There's a movie that's out. It stars Steve Martin, and it's called Leap of Faith. That exposes everything.
Well, you know, people are programmed, Bob.
I know.
Not to believe when you say, because anywhere you go anymore, again, and I'm telling you this for a fact, as soon as you hear somebody say conspiracy theories, for an example, if you go to Wikipedia and you type in chemtrails, you're going to get chemtrail conspiracy. But if you go to Wikipedia and you type in geoengineering, you're going to find out what chemtrails is all about. Your dad, you told me on an interview over the telephone, your dad knew something also about chemtrails.
Yes, and what he always said was those airplanes that you would see up in the sky, those jet trains, and the rockets they've been launching since the 60s. It steers up the atmosphere, and when they have strong winds, it blows throughout the country, and that's the result of these chemtrails and the clouds.
Now, you know, we've known that NASA's been involved with the military in a program called geoengineering and seeding, to where they're actually using barium, they're using aluminum, and the strontium, they're using all these chemicals. Did NASA design these for the jet programs for the military?
What my dad always told me, yes.
Wow. NASA was the one that did this through secret government documentations that was classified, so the general public's not supposed to know about this stuff.
Right.
How did they ever keep this classified information from the general public and then not see it?
Well, they have a ways of doing stuff like that.
You've got to have serious money to buy people off. For an example, for Edwin Buzz Aldridge to come out, or Aldrin rather, excuse me, and to say that this landing was a fake, and you say it was done in Area 5150?
That's what my dad told me, and here's an article right here that proves that Edwin Aldrin came out in an interview and said it was a fake.
You know, there's some strange things that's going on. We've seen where NASA for many years hid back footage of UFO activity in outer space with the astronauts. Did your dad ever talk about any of the UFO sightings from the other astronauts?
Not really, but I'd like to share testimony with this. Now, some people, when I tell them this, they may think I'm crazy. Where we live in the city, I would be on our front porch, and just standing on the front porch. And I would see these spotlights playing tag with each other from about the northeast sky. Now, I thought for first it was from the Rock Hall of Fame. But get this, it's only on a cloudy night. You know, when it's clear night, you don't see it. So figure that one out.
There's a lot of things that were going on in Detroit a couple years back, to where they were watching all these strange lights, police officers seen them.
Right.
When they contact NASA for some reason, because usually they figure NASA has its Hubble telescope, NASA has special satellites that we don't even know about that perhaps your dad may have told you some information.
Yeah, he did.
So they can watch all this stuff, but NASA always shuns telling the truth about this stuff. Why did your dad, or did he ever tell you why they make so much cover-up in this program?
Money.
Really?
Money. That's it, the bottom line. And the Bible teaches money is the root of all kinds of evil. The love of money is right. So that's it, basically for money. You have people that are paid off to keep things quiet and all that. It's more or less like a con game.
Did your dad ever visit Area 5150?
No, he never did, no.
Did your dad know people who was inside Area 5150?
Some, yes.
Was he able to get any information out of those people, or were it hard to pull information out, what was going on?
It's like pulling teeth with them.
Did your dad tell you that people's lives are at threat? over certain information?
Yeah, if they would leak the information out, then bam.
You would end up taking a ride,
Right.
and it wouldn't be outer space,
No,
right?
no.
Well, we know that this happens all the time. You know, folks, you probably say to yourself right there now, I don't believe this. You mean to tell me our own government is going to fake a landing on the moon? Hey, folks, there's a lot of things out there that the more I investigate, the more research that I put in it, I'm shocked how this stuff gets covered up. And it goes through a chain of command. You got to get our youth of today. Then you got to turn them into junior highs, get their brains controlled. Then by the time they get out of high school and head to the universities, they're already programmed to laugh and mock and shake their heads at what we're about to tell you. So I said all this to say this. If NASA faked this moon landing, then what else did they fake? Bob, was your dad 100% serious when he told you he believed 100 without doubt, working for NASA all these years, that this was fake?
Yes, he did.
Did you ever ask him a question of, Dad, are you sure? Did you ever sit down and have a conversation with him?
One time, yes, and he says everything's all a cover-up. And like I said, he knew because he knew a lot of influential people, and so they were talking among them in the shop.
Now, you said this was for money.
Basically, yeah. Isn't everything for money? Payoffs?
That's what I wanted to get. But so let's connect the dots for the people out there.
All right.
If this is all about money for NASA,
Right.
who funds NASA?
The government.
So the government's going to fund programs that make progress, correct?
Right.
So if NASA doesn't make certain much of a program, they're not going to get the funding from the government, right?
Right.
So if they claim that they land on the moon, then surely the money's going to come in, isn't it?
Oh, right, right.
So they claim that they beat the Russians to on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
They never happened. Did you get any information from any of your dad's friends or people that you knew that worked at NASA why the funding started cutting back after they made such
He
leaps
really
amount?
didn't go into detail that much.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah. He didn't go into detail that much.
Because I've often wondered how they could pull this off and fake to everybody that they really did this when they didn't. Think about how hard it would be to leave planet Earth in a rocket, go up so many thousands of miles, and then land on the moon at a precise point. You got to make this complete timing of the orbits to make, and where are you going to get the power to thrust off that to come back into the atmosphere? Things just didn't add up.
No, and everything. The world is being kept in the dark. Put it bluntly,
Yeah.
And basically that's it. Money is the root of all kinds of evil. Payoffs.
You know, knowing this,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people out there tonight watching the show.
Right.
Whenever they get it. On the internet, locally here in Brunswick Hills, they're going to say, there's no way. You guys are crazy. There's just no way you're going to tell me that landing on the moon was a hoax and a fake. You guys are crazy.
Let them think what they want, Yeah. Like I say, this video at the end you watch it and decide for yourself. That's all I have to say.
You know, Bob, and it goes into the same thing when you look at the towers, okay? And you go to 9/11, what happened?
That was a cover-up, too.
You guys can say whatever you want, but Building 7 came down the same day. How many of you mockers and scoffers ever did any research of why Building 7 came down? I've showed the video when they asked John Kerry, Mr. Kerry, did you guys pull Building 7? Well, yes, we did, because the two towers were shaking so violently, we figured the damage done, we pulled Building 7. John Kerry, if you pulled Building 7, when those twin towers came down, you had to have charges set up 3 or 4 weeks ahead of time in order to bring those towers down. Conspiracy theory? We're crazy? Watch this video that Bob researched. Now, Bob is an associate producer of mine, along with Chris Naso, that does wonderful jobs. Folks, we don't wrap our heads with aluminum foil. We don't sit in our beds and cross our arms at night, wait for electricity to strike us and come up with this stuff. We're not some wacko nut jobs. We do our research, we do our homework, we talk to multiple people, and we make sure of what we present on these shows is fact. It's up for you. You can believe in the educational and indoctrinational system, or some of you out there just might open up the brain God give you and look and say, is it really possible that they pulled this stuff off? Is it possible they pulled the towers down? Are they really spraying us? Bob, as we run the show down, what would you like to tell the audience out there about this moon landing, Apollo 11?
Well, do the research, watch this video that's coming up at the end of this program, and judge for yourself. That's all I have to say.
When you've seen this program, after what your dad has told you,
yes,
and you and I talked about numerous times, and Ernie Sanders and other people have talked about it, Alex Jones and whatnot, we can go on and on and on. After you watched the video, what was something in there that really struck you that perhaps you didn't know before?
Well, basically, I knew everything because of what my dad told me and all that. So it was no surprise to me.
Oh, really? So this video really connected all the dots, and it just reinforced everything that your dad working at NASA
Right,
said.
yeah, right.
So as we close this show down, fake landing, Apollo 11 on the moon.
And plus the other moon landings after that.
Ah, good point. We didn't even elaborate on that. So how many other moon landings were there, supposedly?
Well, let's see. There was the Apollo 16. And what else is there?
So you say there's 2 or 3 more landings?
Yeah, the Apollo 16 and Apollo 15, yeah. And all those, they land, you know, with the moon rover?
Yeah.
They show that on the on this video, and you could see for yourself. So like I say, watch the video at the end and decide for yourself. We're not, like Duane said, conspiracy theorists. We do the research, and my dad had first knowledge of all this, and so just watch the video, people, and you decide for yourself.
Right here in the Fire Report, it's all about in search of the truth. I don't believe everything someone tells me. I have to research and make sure. I want to know the truth. Some of the videos I bring to you, they're right there for you to watch and check it out. You got to decide. You're going to believe your teacher? You're going to believe your professor? Who are you going to believe? Why don't you take the time and find out what you're watching, is it true or not? Could some of this be holograms? Go on YouTube and type in holograms, holographic. Check it out for yourself and then say, are we being told the truth? Hey, I want to thank Pastor Bob Papp for stopping in today, one of my associate producers. I want to thank Chris Naso for all the work he's done. Folks, we got some great shows coming up on chemtrails and on UFOs and on nutrition, and we got some stuff about the 666 Cashless Society. Great shows coming up. Don't go nowhere. Stick around, watch the video, and then ask yourself, did we really land on the moon?
Okay, I'm talking with Bill Casing, and Bill Casing is you might call a pioneer in this whole issue of getting at truth and reality, and specifically in the area of the Apollo moon missions, what happened and what didn't happen. And when the module set down on the surface of the moon, the amount of propulsion that would have been required to do that, and it leaves no cloud of dust, no crater.
Right. Having seen hundreds of rocket firings when I was employed by Rocketdyne, I know that the jet of the lunar module lander, the lunar lander, would have created an enormous crater. It would have scoured the moon's surface. It would have tossed up rocks, sand, everything, and created a crater maybe so large that the entire lunar lander could have sunk into it. After all, we're dealing with a 10,000-pound thrust engine, which is pointed directly at the surface, lowered into the surface, and yet, if you look at pictures of the lunar lander on the moon, there is no disturbance whatsoever under the lunar lander's rocket.
And no dust deposited in the pads, the cup-shaped pads at the bottom.
That's another good point. Dust would have been blown 6 ways from Sunday and would have landed everywhere.
And then the famous scene, which has been played over and over, where they are landing there, but they're setting down, and you're hearing the astronaut talking through it.
Oh, that's a good point. I let's say, became aware of that only recently, that here's Neil Armstrong talking about landing on the moon with a microphone, and yet he's sitting practically on top of a rocket engine that is putting out sound levels of about 140 or 150 decibels. Now, we know that that is absolutely impossible to overcome that sound level inside the lunar lander with a normal human voice.
Eagle, we got you now. It's looking good, over. Roger, copy. Eagle, Houston, after yaw around angles, S-band pitch, -9er, yaw, +18. Roger, you're a go. You go to continue power descent. You're a go to continue power descent.
Altitude now 21,000 feet, still looking very good. Velocity down now to 1,200 feet per second.
You're looking great to us, Eagle. Give us a reading on the 1202 program alarm. Roger, we got you. We're going at alarm.
Good radar data. We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Altitude 4,200.
Houston, you're a go for landing, over. Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet. Program alarm.
Altitude 1,600. 1,400 feet, still looking very good.
700 feet, 21 down. 33 degrees. 100 feet, down at 19. 1201. 1201. Roger, 1201 alarm. We're go. Same type. We're go. Altitude, velocity, light. 8.5 down. 220 feet. 13 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely. 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down. 60 seconds. Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet, down 2.5. Picking up some dust. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. Good. Okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Okay, we've changed our graphic picture here in the background, and it's a one-sheet poster that I put together from pictures on the website www.geocities.com/Apollo Reality/. And the gentleman that put this together got actually these images off the Langley Research Center website. And some of these, actually, you're just seeing for the first time yourself. Isn't that right, Bill?
That's right, yeah. I'm amazed to find these pictures. I've never seen any of them before except the one in the upper right. And what amazes me is this one here showing a model of the moon with a camera track, showing how easily it would have been to fake the filming of the moon.
And then the image just to the right of that shows like the finished moon.
Exactly.
With somebody sitting at the controls, maybe turning it or...
Right. These are very revealing pictures, and I strongly recommend people with PCs to download them and study them. And of course, this brings up the subject of the death of whistleblowers. Men like Gus Grissom, who was burned to death along with Chafee and White.
He went pretty open with it, putting a lemon on
Yeah, he was going to give an interview about what he really thought about Apollo. And as you say, he hung a lemon on the command capsule on the day that he was murdered. And we should also look at Scott Grissom, his son's evidence that a secret switch was installed in the capsule to ignite the fire that killed Grissom, Chafee, and White. We could go on for quite a while about the death and injury to people that have pursued this Apollo hoax subject very diligently.
They went to a NASA spokesman who was Brian Welch.
Oh, yes,
and
right.
They asked him about some of these anomalies.
Right.
You recall what he said about some of the things they were asking him?
He tried to dispute everything that the Apollo hoax advocates brought out. But the interesting thing is that about a month after he gave this interview, he was dead.
That always kind of puzzled me because he was at least trying to hold on to it, right? So, do you think they would have actually killed him just because he didn't do a good enough job? Or?
Yes, I think that's what happened. He didn't do a good enough job. So they killed him as an example to other people who are defending, like Richard Hoagland. Hoagland obviously is a fake, and he's an employee of NASA who on many occasions has tried to discredit me and my associates.
There are much better mysteries that call into question some of the photography, which I agree with you looks frankly hoaxed.
Well, some of it could have been staged and they could have released it, Richard.
Exactly. That's what some of my photographic experts that I've called in over the years, and I've been to Goddard, I've looked at the NSSD film. I mean, I have examples, actual examples, Eric, of NASA airbrushing the moon.
Well, I know this.
And, but you see, I have a different model.
So you're saying they faked some of the photos?
I think they faked some photos. I think they've hidden other things in the photos, and I'll give you my bottom line. I think there is an enormous Apollo conspiracy, but I think we've been sold the wrong conspiracy to keep people like you, bright guys who are asking good questions, looking in the wrong direction, which these people are past masters of doing, because the real conspiracy is not did we go to the moon, it's what did we find on the moon.
No, there's aliens
they
up there.
don't want us to know. And as I said earlier in the show, I found areas where NASA faked the imagery, I believe, to hide really cool stuff.
Okay.
And I found other areas where the photographs are consistent with us landing on the moon.
And it's possible, Richard, that some of these beauty shots were staged and they threw them in there and grouped them in with the real ones.
Exactly.
Next up, let's go to our wild card line. You're on the air with us. Hi there.
Our next speaker is Professor James McKinney.
If you double the size of your rocket, you don't double the size of your payload. So you're very limited. And now let's try and get to the next planet or out to the moon. We have to start sending individual things up there, couple them together, and then go out to these other planets. By the way, there's a small problem with going to the moon, and inch by inch, NASA is leaking out that they know that there's a problem there. It's called the Van Allen belts, high radiation belts of charged particles around Earth, and we don't know how to get through them, they say. Well, isn't that interesting, because there sure didn't seem to be a problem back in 1969. Obviously, they didn't go to the moon. The United States did not go to the moon. The Russians knew it all along. I thought at the time we did, but I've since learned we absolutely did not. And there's no question about it. And they're starting to figure it out. NASA has a program called Living with a Star. That's a pretty name for how do we get through the Van Allen belts. They have all their top scientists working on it. It's a tremendous problem because we do not have any kind of a spacecraft that we can send up that doesn't have metal in it. And when these charged particles hit metal, they produce X-rays. Nothing you can do to get around that. So anybody sitting around something metal in outer space in the Van Allen belts is going to be French fried. And so that whole thing was a giant hoax. And you have second and third tier scientists in the United States who are running around saying, oh, yes, we did, yes, we did. But the very top level people, what I call the tier one scientists, the black op mill scientists, know for a fact we didn't go. And it's a real problem. They don't know how to get through there. This picture is with the new Hubble camera, and it shows that, in fact, if you take this angular distance out to Pluto and you translate it into the surface of the moon, we can, in fact, resolve the landing sites, the alleged lunar landing sites. And the way you would do this is you take the pictures at dusk when the shadows became very long, and it would be a very hard thing for them to fake. So at any rate, we have telescopes on Earth that are much larger than the Hubble. Much better resolving power. So why, you would think these astronomers would be chomping at the bit to show you those lunar landing sites. And look at the incredible resolving power of this telescope we have here. Why have none of them done that? Because there ain't nothing there. And we get all kinds of excuses. Oh, we can't turn the telescope up there because the moon's too bright. Well, then all of a sudden we saw the full moon on a web page, on a NASA web page, the entire full moon taken with the Hubble Space Telescope. And you're telling me they can't take one little teeny patch of the moon, which is millions of times less bright. So bottom line is, they know they didn't go.
Join us now on a quest for the truth to the moon. In this film, we shall not only prove beyond all reasonable doubt that many of the official NASA images of lunar exploration are fake, but we shall also examine the motives for the biggest lie put before the world. Why did NASA repeatedly fake lunar images and photographs? Why did NASA stage lunar expeditions which did not happen? The answer will surprise you. NASA spent gigantic sums of money during the 1960s, but most of it was spent on the ground, not in space. Huge American corporations, many of which were manufacturing hardware for the military, made gigantic profits designing space vehicles and, more importantly, life-sized models of spaceships, and even huge stage sets resembling the lunar surface. Someone in NASA had realized that after taking billions of dollars from the American people, if they couldn't make it to the moon, they would fake it to the moon.
Obviously, if you're going to somewhere that nobody has been before, you need to have a simulator which recreates that environment as closely as you can. If you're going to the moon, you recreate the surface of the moon. And here we see a section of the lunar surface created. It's about 30 foot high, 30 foot long, 35 foot long. scale is given by the two people standing in front of it. There were plenty of simulation exercises, but the point is, and should be taken into account in virtually everything that is discussed with the Apollo program, 400,000 people may have worked on the program in total, but none of them had a need to know more than his own job required. The people who were making the rockets didn't know what the people who were making the spacesuits were doing, because they had no need to know about that. Their job was to make the best models and the best simulation of the lunar surface that they could. And if we come up to this picture here, we see the three scales on which these models were built. We have here the whole moon as one unit. It stands about 20 foot high. We have here behind it a section of the surface of the moon. You'll notice it's curved. And here we have a more detailed section of the lunar surface.
What you're saying is that the images which we're told show a camera pointing out the window of the lunar module as it's coming into land on the moon could well have been filmed previously using these large-scale models.
That's right. It could well be that what we are looking at are films of realistic models. We have no means of knowing if they were actually taken on the lunar surface, or whether what we're watching is part of the simulation exercise and the training exercise. And you'll notice here on these models there is a camera track. A camera starting at this end, coming down here, would approach the moon, or appear to approach the moon, and become ever closer towards it. This is a simulation rig that was built. This is the command and service module of the Apollo program. And you'll notice that the window here looks out onto a block here, and there's another one here. They're curved. These are the screens onto which the lunar surface was projected as the craft made a simulated approach towards the lunar surface.
Is what we're seeing a mixture of fact and fiction?
It is fact, it is fiction. It's mixed together. It's hard to separate them until you examine it closely. If a spacecraft is in deep space, the only possible explanation for a light seen through the window of the spacecraft is the sun. It's the only bright light in space. If it's not the sun, then it has to be some other artificial light, which implies that that particular image is possibly fiction.
July 1961. NASA was soon being criticized for the flimsy construction of their hardware. The first orbital capsules did not even have windows in them for the astronauts to look out of. One of the most vocal critics was one of NASA's most respected astronauts, an all-American hero named Virgil Gus Grissom, who almost drowned when recovery helicopters were unable to lift his space capsule from the sea. After a successful journey into space, Gus Grissom almost died through NASA's bad planning. Or was this an early attempt to silence Gus Grissom? May 1963. Astronaut Gordon Cooper experiences re-entry problems in his Faith 7 rocket ship. The prototype lunar module, known as the LIM, had serious stability problems. At this stage, there was no guarantee that even if NASA managed to get a spaceship orbiting the moon, they could land safely without killing the crew.
Could the footage which we see of the limb approaching the moon be filmed in a TV studio?
It was filmed in a TV studio. There's absolutely no doubts whatsoever about that. And the way that this film was created was by the use of models. There's nothing secret about the models. They exist. You can go and see them today. The models were very lifelike, very realistic. There is one that is a life-size model. It's in Flagstaff in Arizona. It's 2 miles long, and it's an exact replica of the Sea of Tranquility. The photographs were used to create from those images the replica of the Sea of Tranquility, so that if it was flown over in a helicopter, it would appear as if it was a spacecraft approaching a similar area to land. So yes, all the scenes of the lunar surface were filmed on Earth.
Radiation, and without having spacesuits nor spacecraft which can protect the occupants from radiation, NASA convinced the American people to pay $40 billion for the space program.
The most lethal forms of radiation, of course, are at the higher end of the spectrum. That's gamma rays and X-rays. We know what ultraviolet can do. If you stay out too long in the sun, you get sunburn and skin cancer and die, and it's all very sad. But gamma rays, and X-rays especially, are particularly lethal to humans, unprotected humans. There was no protection that I have been able to identify. I've found no reference to it. I found nothing that will tell me what level of protection is offered, so I have to assume none was. I've contacted the manufacturers of the spacesuits, and they said there was no radiation protection built into the spacesuits, because I asked them if these same spacesuits could be used by technicians to go to Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island, because the nuclear reactors produce the same radiation as produced in space. They said no, not advisable, no protection.
James Van Allen grew up in the small Iowa town of Mount Pleasant during the 1920s. He was an exceptional student, became class valedictorian, and exhibited an intense vision that even then looked beyond our planet.
The environment was the time of the Cold War, and it was something scary. It was something for a child, it seemed very scary to have to hear about bomb shelters and hiding under our desks. And I remember first hearing that my father was going to go to Russia and being so frightened by that, and asking my father, why was he going to Russia? Wasn't he scared? And I remember him explaining to me that in the scientific community, what they do, and as they take data and exchange data, somehow that transcends what is going on in the political arena. So that there is always a sense that the quest for intellectual activity was something very special. Remember that, so that the Cold War suddenly didn't seem very cold to me, even as a young child.
In Washington, the media focused on the Explorer 1 achievement as at last legitimizing the U.S. as a worthy adversary to confront the communist Sputniks. The public seemed captivated with the propaganda created by this new space race. Dr. Van Allen and his students, however, chose to focus on the data that was returning from their scientific instrument inside Explorer 1.
When the first results came back, the group at the University of Iowa, this was Van Allen and Ernie Ray, then began to help with it, eventually Carl McElwain, saw immediately that there was an anomaly, there was something unexpected.
We have encountered a very great increase in radiation intensity, which is vastly beyond what could be due to cosmic rays alone.
We call it geomagnetically trapped radiation. And I gave an explanation of what my interpretation at a press conference following the scientific session. And one of the reporters stood up and he was trying to visualize what I was saying. And he said, "You mean it encircles the Earth like a belt?" I said, "Yes, that's great. That's what it is. It's like a belt around the Earth." And so that's the way they got the name of radiation belt, from this exchange of this newspaper reporter and myself.
Well, certainly the discovery of the radiation belts was the most important discovery of the International Geophysical Year, because it represented a discovery of some major phenomenon that had a substantial impact both on scientific research and on plans for manned flight later on.
In late 1958 and early 1959, Van Allen flew instruments on Pioneers 3 and 4. Both were unsuccessful attempts to hit the moon, but their flights provided the Iowa group with essential confirming data. Pioneer 3 documented the existence of a second radiation belt, and Pioneer 4 became the first U.S. spacecraft to orbit the sun.
Any ill effects from the Van Allen radiation belts?
No. Now, I'm not sure we went far enough out to encounter the Van Allen radiation belt. Maybe we did.
Say that I'm not a chemist, I'm not a geologist or an anthropologist. I'm a retired electrical engineer. I've worked at NASA Goddard for over 20 years. I'm retired now, and I have worked with image processing, which is similar to some of the things that are done on computers today. However, at the time that I did my work, the computers that are so well established today were not available.
Yeah, hello. I like your presentation very much, but I got a couple of questions here. First one is, what, if any, are the differences between you and Richard Hoagland concerning the politics on the cover-up? And part two is, what's the difference between you and Mr. Hoagland concerning the scientific implications of the face, especially since Richard Hoagland kind of brings in hyperdimensional physics into the picture of the face on Mars? Thank you.
Okay. The one thing I'd like to clarify, I should have done at the beginning, Richard Hoagland and myself are like oil and water. The second thing is that, and I'll go into the third thing, is that Richard comes up with ideas where he does not have groundwork or supporting evidence, not even evidence, and certainly not proof that things exist where they don't. For instance, I've seen some of his work where he has found swastikas and German tanks on Mars, and he has found cathedrals on the moon Europa of Jupiter that resemble burnt-out cathedrals from World War II in Europe, and various other things which not only can't be proved, but they aren't even evidence, and I stay as far away from him as I can. And there was the last part of your question concerned, I forget exactly.
Yes, he always talks about hyperdimensional physics,
Okay.
and he comes up with all these formulas on the dimensions of also the pyramid on Mars, and all these, in his book he has all these geometric configurations, and he tries to bring in hyperdimensional physics.
It's hard enough for me to give evidence and present it at conferences with facts that I can show to scientists, but to try to back up something with a relationship to another planet is so hypothetical that it just doesn't have the substance to hold up. Most scientists would classify that under the term of numerology and not have anything to do with it.